Hi, my name is Adrian Reed, and I'm extremely pleased to be joined by Sarah Glenister, who is Director at Change That Matters. Sarah will be speaking at the IRM BCT, that's the Business Change and Transformation Conference later this month, and kindly agreed to spend some time today talking about her topic. Sarah's session is entitled, What if you included those affected by the change in the formulation of the why, the what, and the how? A fascinating topic that really jumped out at me from the program when I saw it. So Sarah, welcome, and thanks for making the time to have a chat.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Adrian.
So Sarah, let's start at the very beginning. Your presentation is about involving those who are affected by change, and this is something that I know we're both really enthusiastic about. So what made you particularly focus on that topic? I mean, is it that you've seen situations where that didn't happen, or why is it such an important topic to you?
Well, I think initially, I mean, this is going back in 2011, 2012, and certainly back then, I think things are better now, but certainly back then, a lot of change was led very much top down and didn't actually involve a lot of the people who were going to be impacted by the change. And I think it's matured since then, but I think sometimes we still forget to include the people who are going to be most impacted. And that's for a variety of reasons. I mean, sometimes it's, sorry, you might hear a storm. So sometimes that's because, there's a fear that the change isn't going to be popular. And so don't want to go out with a half a story because they don't want it to derail really quickly. And the problem is when decisions are already starting to be made, people know because the unofficial communication lines work very quickly.
Yeah.
And as soon as people start to hear about things and then don't officially hear, then they assume you're hiding things. So there's a number of reasons to go out early, even if you don't have all of the picture. And there's a huge amount of research that's shown how important it is to include the people who are impacted by the change as much as possible in the change itself.
Yeah, it's interesting. That rumor mill, it's so true, isn't it? That rumor mill, it's like when there's an absence of communication, rumor fills it. I remember
Absolutely.
I remember working in an organization and we all knew there was going to be a restructure because all the senior managers would disappear for 2 days on end. And it's like the least subtle way of doing change is just have everyone disappear to an off-site meeting. But okay, so it feels like part of this is related to people and stakeholders, as we often call them
Yep.
in projects. So many change initiatives and interventions talk about stakeholder analysis, but in my experience, at least, sometimes that's a little bit limited and inward looking. And I wonder whether you can share any tools or tips for casting the net wider.
Well, I look at stakeholders, including the normal groupings that everyone looks at, but I also look at the stakeholders being people who, if they are not consulted and feel like they should have been, that can derail a project. I mean, and sometimes that's not the people who are directly involved, but it might be someone in a different part of the company, or it might be someone who's a major client who really doesn't like the particular change or direction that is going to be pursued. And so, if you don't actually widen that range of stakeholders, sometimes you can miss someone quite crucial to actually getting the change project off the ground, or indeed getting the change project continuing with the momentum. And
Mm.
I've seen there's a lot of tools in change, and one of them is like talking about the blast radius, about who is immediately impacted by the change, and then if they're impacted by the change, who connects with them that might be impacted, and so on. So as it gets further out, there are people who are less connected directly with the project, but they are connected with the people who are connected with the project and therefore
Yeah.
impacted. So it's, I mean, you can go too big, obviously, but I think it's good to plot that, and the only way you can do that is actually talking to the people who are going to be impacted by the change, because they know who that next level out is.
I love that analogy. I've not heard that analogy before in the context of stakeholder analogy, but of a blast radius, because you think actually, although I guess it's somewhat related to bombs and war, but it works because you've sort of got well, actually, if it's a thermonuclear warhead that's coming in, that's going to have a bigger footprint than a sort of World War II bomb type of thing, but also that the fears of people who think that's coming are going to be very different as well. So
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
really interesting analogy. I'm gonna mull that one over. I think that's created quite some thinking.
Well, I'm not. Yeah, like, to be honest, I was sitting in a meeting today, and they were talking about how ag- and how aggressive the program was. It's a very aggressive program, and what they mean was that there's a lot to happen very quickly, and
Yeah,
the timelines are very short. And I was thinking, oh, that's not helpful language. Like, you actually have to be really careful about the language you use. And there you go. I'm doing it myself, calling it a blast radius, and someone, yourself, comes off with bombs. But of course, that's where it came from.
yeah, yeah.
I shall have to think of another analogy.
A different analogy.
You can have that one.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank you. No, it is interesting. I remember a few years ago, someone was talking to me about the significance of the metaphors used in organizations, and I started to listen to the metaphors used in the organization I was working for at the time, and they were all about battles and wars
Yeah,
and competition. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting, because I was
yeah.
blind to it until someone you just pick it up. But
Yeah, and in fact, I remember having a conversation with someone about a year ago, and they said something about being brutally honest, and I said,
yeah,
"Well, can you not be honest without being brutal?"
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And because for some people that is really off-putting when you actually use that term.
yeah.
So yeah, I think language is really, really important, and language and change is really important, and the language and of the leader is really important. So what you have to remember is the people who are in power and who are driving the change. People really listen to them, but
Mm,
also they listen to what they're not saying, and they give a huge weight to what they do say. So you might be a leader and just throw away, have a throwaway line like, "Oh, it'll be fine," you know, or you might just say something that implies that there might be a restructure of some kind, but
yeah,
that's not
yeah.
what you're meaning. Um, but because you're the leader, people will hook onto that, and they will really interpret your message very differently. So for the leader and the change leads in particular, they have to be very careful about what they're saying when they go out there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that leads us into another topic actually around communication.
Hmm.
And communication is a tricky topic, and I think it's probably fair to say that most organizations that do employee engagement surveys, communication is probably in the top three. It's probably definitely in the top 10. And it's tricky, isn't it? Because too much too soon and people tune out, right?
That's
Like
correct. Yeah.
irrelevant information becomes a problem, and too little too late and people feel locked out. And communication, it seems to me, is very different to things like engagement and
Hmm.
participation, and they're related but different. So I mean, it's a huge topic, but are you able to share any tips related to communicating effectively in the context of change and to create that kind of engagement?
Well, certainly when I established the Change Engagement Network, which is the main topic really of my presentation, we the reason we actually got the go-ahead to do that was as part of a staff survey, or staff engagement about looking at how the health service was going. One of the things that came back was that they hear more about what's going to happen in their health service from the media than they
Wow.
do through internal hospital channels. Now, it was a particularly difficult time. There was lots of things happening and lots of things happening that shouldn't be happening, and so the media were all over it. We were kind of hoping that someone would escape from a prison to put the focus on the justice system rather than health. But people were hearing more about what was happening that way. And so that really was one of the arguments for establishing this network. And what we know about communication is people believe the communication when it comes from people like them. So the great thing about having a network that spans every level of the organisation and all of the hospitals is that people can go to a fellow nurse or doctor or admin person or someone at their hospital and ask about something that's happening in the bigger health system, and they're more likely to believe what they're told. So it didn't replace the cascading kind of information that used to go, that continued to go down from the chief executive to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. But it really complemented it. And it meant that the communication was believed because it was the people that you knew that were telling you what was happening.
Yeah, there's an old expression that goes something along the lines of people like them.
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
and it seems so true, doesn't it? And sort of weaving in another theme here, because if we're, as a community of change practitioners, whatever our role happens to be, if we're going to design change that works and involve people, then another topic that feels quite important is diversity and inclusion. Because it seems sometimes that too many services are designed for average folks that don't really exist in the real world. So to what
No.
extent would you say diversity and inclusion overlaps with the topics you're covering? And do you have any tips on building those into our change initiatives?
Well, to be honest, I think the biggest threat in change to diversity and inclusion is expediency. So I think what happens is that we need something and we need it right now. And as soon as you kind of get on that pathway, you need someone to come and do some work, or you need to get a response back. What you do is you go to your networks, you go to your friends and say, do you know anyone with this information? Or you go to the people you already have contacts with. And what that does is, of course, you go to the people who are, as we just talked about, who are like you. And it's not an intentional thing. So I think sometimes expediency is one of the biggest threats to diversity and inclusion in all sorts of ways, but certainly in change. If you need to pilot something, you go to your group of friendlies. If you need to get something signed off, you'll go to the person who signed you off last time. So it's for very real reasons sometimes, because you have to get it, in the billing cycle, or you have to, get sign off before somebody goes on leave, or for whatever reason. But I think that we miss a lot of opportunities because of the rush that we're in, and yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I get that sense as well, and I sort of wonder whether it just things will take sometimes things take the length of time they're going to take. They just take that time differently. And if we
Yes,
don't
that's right.
if we don't engage the right people at the right time, we'll end up doing the work again. So
Absolutely,
it's a
absolutely.
false
Um,
economy.
and of course, the other thing is the broadening. We really need to broaden what it means by inclusion and diversity. So, and it really comes down to the individual, because people individually turn up to work differently every day, and they might have elderly parents, they might have young kids, they might have other things going on in their life that means that they can't be as present at work as they often are, and that can change from day to day. So I think making sure that we have that capacity in our change programs to allow for that is super important.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean this comes back to people again, and it comes back to the human side of actually allowing people to be people, and
Yeah.
accepting that people have priorities that aren't within work, and so
Yep.
expecting them to work 60-hour weeks, 70-hour weeks is probably not the right thing to do in many cases. So fantastic. So my concluding question then, and slightly pivoting, because I mean the BCT conference, Business Change and Transformation. I mean it's interdisciplinary. So one of the reasons I personally really like it is the fact, you know, I'm a business analyst. I speak to other BAs all the time, but I love
Yep.
going and speaking to all sorts of other change practitioners. You're traveling a long way to attend the conference, which is a sign, which is a good sign. What attracted to you, or why would you say people should attend it?
Well, I was trying to get there last March. I didn't quite make it. So I currently spend about half my year in the UK and half my year in Australia, which is, if I get the timings right, it's good. Sometimes I end up with multiple winters.
Oh
Um,
no.
but look, the conference just looked really good. It looked like a really good depth of field, a variety of different people from different backgrounds. Like you said, sometimes conferences can attract all of the same kinds of people, and that again leads to less diversity, right? So I think one of the main strengths that I've seen, certainly from looking at the conference and being in contact with the conference organisers, is that there is a real sense of trying to get as many people's opinions and points of view as possible in the conference, and it just looks like a great place to be.
Absolutely, it's definitely not an echo chamber, and it's got that
No, it's
diversity built
great.
in from the fabric. So well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time out today to have a chat, and I hope the storm passes you over with with no
Well,
damage.
I think it's already passed.
Oh
I
right,
think
wow.
I wasn't sure how much you were hearing over the mic, but there was some pretty big thunder claps. So if you didn't hear them, then that's great.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I think we missed
but
them, which is good.
I think you missed them. Fantastic. And yeah, so I think the storm has now passed.
Fantastic. Well, excellent. Well, thanks again, Sarah, and well, I'll see you in person in the conference in just a few weeks' time.
I will see you there.